if you've turned into a Knoxville Ice Bears broadcast within the last decade, you've probably heard Joel Silverberg on the call. Welcome into the sit down today. We have a very special guest. Obviously, Joel, welcome to the show. Knoxville through and through. You were born and raised in Knoxville, and now you get to call the hometown hockey club. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's still kind of surreal sometimes to be able to have a career that I went to school for and be able to work in my hometown, and now getting ready to enter year 12. Sometimes it takes me by surprise a little bit as to A, how long it's been, and B, that I still get to do it for a living. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, congratulations on 12 years, first and foremost. That's a really long time to be doing anything, let alone, calling hockey games. And we were talking a little bit about it, before we came on about, just how fast and, how crazy hockey gets. And so, doing it for 12 years, I mean, obviously it's gotten easier as you've gone, but, it still can't be easy to go in and do that every day.
It's definitely, it's a long season, and you play 56, now 58 games a year, and which is actually small. It's a short season for most hockey leagues, where you're talking about like 70 to 72 games in the ECHL and the AHL. The NHL plays 82, and now it's but it's still such a long season. You're talking multiple games a week, and the speed never dies down, and the players' intensity never dies down. And then you finally get to the playoffs, and that's where everything just multiplies. Everything gets on, it's gasoline on the fire, where emotions are high, fans are into it, broadcasters are into it. So it doesn't get boring. That's even in sometimes, less than successful seasons. There's always something to talk about. That's the beauty of the sport. And yeah, it goes by fast though. It's a long season, but you blink and then suddenly it's the end of April and your season's over and you're waiting for the next 6 months to zoom by so hockey can come back.
And this last 6 months definitely zoomed by super fast. I blinked and it's football and hockey season again. And I get to, do this with all my fall people. And, it's been really awesome. And so thank you for being a part of it. But let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning. What first got you hooked on sports broadcasting?
I've always been into sports, playing sports, watching sports, talking about sports. I had never really thought about a career in sports media. I was a sophomore in high school when I joined my high school newspaper staff. I had an English teacher recommend that I do it. The only thing I really thought I could write about was sports. And I grew up reading a lot of sports articles from, local papers on ESPN.com. That was just kind of my source of intaking media. My parents really limited us to watching TV and playing video games. Couldn't do a whole lot of that. So our entertainment was reading. And so I was always reading the sports section. I was reading, whatever was happening online and then trying to stay informed. So for me, joining the newspaper staff, I kind of felt like I knew how to write sports articles already because I had been reading them for so long, even as a young kid. So I got into that. I started writing for the high school paper. I started freelancing for the local paper when I was a senior in high school, went to college to be a journalist. And then my sophomore year, I was required to take a radio class for my mass communications major. And my advisor pulled me aside, and he was a former play-by-play broadcaster and radio station manager. And he said, "Hey, I see the tools in you to be able to do this. So you're always going to need to write. But if you want to start taking more broadcasting courses, this is something that we could work on." And through that radio class, I really enjoyed it. I got to try play-by-play for the first time, calling a basketball game for our college. Really liked it and thought, yeah, let's give this a shot. Let's expand the skill set. And if anything, if it doesn't work out, we'll just go back to writing. And so I kind of started taking more broadcasting courses, did my senior capstone on sports play-by-play, and never looked back after that.
So is that kind of when it went from like being like something that you were kind of, maybe thinking that this could possibly be a dream into like, hey, maybe this could actually be a career?
It kind of through college, just thought that was the goal. And I've heard so many different stories of how long it took certain people to actually get on air gigs, and whether you have to take the writing route first or you have to take the production route first. And some people, they get that opportunity immediately. And, it kind of depends on where you go to school and what your education style is like, because I see a lot of ECHL broadcasters, SPHL broadcasters, they get hired fresh out of college and they had the opportunity to get play-by-play experience while they were in school. It's hard to do that at certain institutions. If I know that Boston University, one of the most historic college hockey programs in the country, they have a student radio station where students get to call hockey games. That's a huge deal because that's a major audience that you get exposure to as well. And the standard obviously is very high because it's Boston University. And then you look at the University of Tennessee, you've got students that are in the process of, working on developing basically a broadcast network for all the club sports because they don't have organized hockey at Tennessee as far as an NCAA affiliation, but they have a club team. They, now they're going back into the ACHA and they have one of the most successful club programs in the country and almost won a national title a couple years ago. So you get the opportunity to call those. Okay, maybe the audience isn't as big as if you were calling D1 games at Boston University, but you have a tape, you have a demo. So it just kind of depends on where you end up and how you get into it. For me, it was more of, this is definitely what I want to do, but I understand that it takes a lot of work to get there. So I considered writing jobs. I considered, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get myself into the sports media scene? And so it kind of just became about, look, I'm just going to get into the industry and then try to work my way up from there.
So how long did it take for you to kind of like find your voice or find your, kind of groove when it came to, broadcasting games?
About 7 years after the Ice Bears hired me, if I'm being honest. I really did not feel comfortable calling play-by-play until at least hockey anyway, until my 7th season calling games here. And that was the last year that I was doing home games only. So I didn't start calling games on the road and traveling with the team until the following season. So the first 7 seasons that I was here, I was strictly at home. I was a game day only employee. They elevated me to the director of broadcasting, a full-time position the following season. And now this is my 5th year doing that. And definitely gained more confidence. But that 7th season, because I was working 2 jobs, I'm still full-time at the Sports Animal 99.1 WNML, the flagship station of the Tennessee Volunteers. So, I had so much going on in that job, was still trying to figure out things with the Ice Bears and, trying to maintain roots in Knoxville. Was I going to relocate? Was I going to continue to stay in my hometown? And so eventually I kind of really settled into the play-by-play aspect of it and really started putting more work into what I was doing with the Ice Bears. And after that 7th year, they kind of saw the potential there and said, okay, I think we can develop this into a real profitable position. And so now we have a full-fledged broadcast. We have a radio affiliate. Our broadcast, generates revenue and, we're selling ads and all that stuff is great. Whereas before it was, okay, we're on the online video stream. We get to the intermission. We're just going to put the headset down. We're going to wait 20 minutes of dead air and then we're going to come back. And it's not like that anymore. So it's taken a lot of hard work. But I think it really, truly did take until that 7th year before I could listen back to my own broadcast and not hate what I was hearing. It was a little bit different for other sports because I played other sports growing up. I really didn't get to play hockey. I got to try 1 year of inline when I was like 10 years old, and then I couldn't do it anymore. But, I played every other sport growing up pretty much. So, I had that firsthand experience, but growing up in the South, grew up in Knoxville, went to high school in Florida, went to college in Georgia. I wasn't surrounded by hockey fanatics. So it was a little bit more difficult to kind of gain that knowledge. I always loved the sport, but to gain that firsthand knowledge took a lot of time, and being surrounded by people that played in the NHL or, coached at a high level or played at a high level or have just been around the game their entire lives, people from Canada, Pennsylvania, New York, wherever, those people pouring knowledge into me has made a huge difference in my development as a play-by-play broadcaster over the years.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that you went to college in Georgia. How did the opportunity to call Ice Bears games, come about? And, what ultimately made you make that decision to come back to Knoxville?
I went to a small college in Northeast Georgia called Piedmont and was recruited to play tennis there. Small Division III school, small conference, but was getting the opportunity to compete as a student athlete, which was, kind of the childhood dream was I wanted to play college sports. But that's when the Fox Sports regional networks were carrying NHL teams games. And we didn't get the Predators. I'm a huge Nashville Predators fan. We didn't get them in Georgia. We got the Atlanta Hawks when they were still there. And after the Hawks left, we got the Carolina Hurricanes. So the only way that I could keep up with the Predators was by going on their website and listening to 102.5 The Game, the Nashville Predators flagship station, and listening to Pete Weber and Tom Callahan and Willie Donick call games. And as I was learning about play-by-play, I thought, man, this sounds exciting. Like the Predators are getting whipped, and this still sounds like a lot of fun. Like this sounds like a game that is this is the sport that just, and it seems challenging. It's so challenging to keep up with the pace. Like, this is where I want to be, like, and I've always loved this sport, but like, I want to do this. And so a friend of mine, who at the time he has a son who's a few years younger than I am. At the time, he was maybe 12 years old. He got to go to the Ice Bears Kids Run the Show night. And he was assigned to the broadcaster, Jonathan Haynes, who was the broadcaster, the voice of the Ice Bears at that time. And I reached out to my friend and said, hey, how did your son get to do that? And he was like, yeah, his kids run the show, got to meet him, got to get introduced, built a bit of a relationship with him. He kind of put us in touch. So I was in touch with him throughout my college career, just asking for career advice, different things that I could be doing. And the summer that I graduated, he had actually resigned to take a job in another state. So he had put in a good word for me with the front office staff and just told me, reach out, send them your resume and see what happens. And so everything kind of went from there. But networking is really the ultimate reason why, when it came to the hockey scene. I had great educators at Piedmont, had great opportunity to call play-by-play for 4 different sports by the time I graduated from college. But it was networking that ultimately allowed me to get my foot in the door. And after a month-long interview process with 3 different interviews, I finally was told, you're the guy. And it's been that way ever since.
Well, I gotta say, out of all of the broadcasters that come to Roanoke, you are by far my favorite. No offense to any of the others. But I do appreciate, in speaking of networking, you always make time to, at least say hi to me, and make sure that, we talk for at least a little bit. And so I do want to say that I appreciate that every time that you come to Roanoke.
Well, and I think that's part of it, is you're trying to pay it forward, because I don't know where somebody might be when they come talk to me, when they're, covering for a publication. And I don't know if is it an independent online media conglomerate, is an affiliated radio or TV station. I don't know everybody that comes up and talks to me on the road. So, you just never know how you might be able to help someone or how they might be able to help you as well. But it's also, it's due to others the way that you would want to be treated. And so I remember still what it was like to be a soon to be college graduate, freaking out that, I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't get hired by the Ice Bears until the September after I graduated. So, and I wasn't hired by the Sports Animal until August. So it took me about, 6 months, or I guess 4 or 5 months, to find a job. And then fortunately I found 2 in about a 2-week span. But I was applying to GameStop. I had applied to a bank. I was worried about what I was going to do. Was I even going to be able to get a job? And so I remember what it was like to be in that situation. And so remembering how networking helped me out so much, because networking was also how I got my job at the Sports Animal as well, and how I ended up getting to have a full-time job being a producer and getting to call high school football play-by-play for the last few years. And, none of that happens if it's not for networking. So it's just important to be able to make those connections and, remember, like, you might be able to point somebody in the right direction. And I don't always, I don't have all the strong connections. I can't get somebody a job at ESPN, but if I can point somebody in the direction of like, hey, we might need some help on weekends, people covering UT football, or the opportunity to fill in on the afternoon drive show as a producer, or, just need somebody to be able to run cables and different stuff like that. You never know when you may be able to help somebody out and get them a job. So, and it can be rewarding, especially when it works out and, they end up really loving it and get to stay in it for a while.
Hey, sometimes all you need is that foot in the door.
Yeah.
You've called everything from high school football to Tennessee baseball. How does your approach change when it comes in, from switching in between sports?
Hockey definitely allows you to let the script kind of write itself. You have to be prepared in player styles, obviously name, number recognition, pronunciations is huge in hockey, even in our league. People still get surprised when I explain to them, yes, it's the SPHL. Most of our players are from up north. A lot of them are from Canada. We have players, we just announced a signing of a player from Switzerland a couple weeks ago. We've had guys from Russia, Sweden. I know that there's one guy that's played in Norway before. So, different players come from all over the place. And, growing up a Preds fan, Pekarine, big deal over in Finland. And you've got Roman Josi, who's from Switzerland. You've got Philip Forsberg, who's from Sweden. Every NHL team that you cheer for is represented by so many different countries. It's the same thing in the SPHL, is you may have 3 or 4 different countries represented on your team at a given time. And so it's So the script definitely writes itself a lot. You just have to be prepared on player information, know the rules of the game because everything happens fast. Baseball is very conversational. The old adage, baseball game might last 2.5 hours, only 8 minutes of that is action. Softball is a little more fast paced. But for both those sports, you have to really be able to dig deep into detail and get into the prep work and have anecdotes about different things and try to engage the broadcast, because baseball can, if a baseball game gets blown out, things can get kind of dry. Whereas with hockey, okay, it's 4-0 in the third period, but goals can be scored quickly. And also fights might still break out, or something crazy might happen, or it might set the tone for the next time these two teams play. And so, the pacing is very different. Basketball, I think, is very fluid. There's you have to understand schemes, X's and O's, focus on where the ball is. So a lot of that is kind of staying within the broadcast and the pacing of it and not getting too far in front of the action. Football is very much a setup type sport. You have the opportunity to set up each play. What formation is the offense in? What is the defense lined up in? Are they showing blitz? And especially now that we're in this era of RPOs and all these different multiple offenses, you kind of have to be on your toes a little bit more. It's not just a matter of lining up in the I formation. All right, here comes a smash mouth. Like, no, look, it's either a handoff or it's play action. There's no RPO. There's no, he might pass it. He might keep it. He might hand it off. He might run a flea flicker. You don't know what's going to happen with football anymore nowadays. So
especially with the football.
Exactly. Yeah. You got the veer and shoot offense where you don't know what's going to happen, but it's great. You get to see the evolution of all these sports, but I think that's kind of the thing with different sports is there's, down distance is so important. Whereas basketball, you're going to say the score a lot because there's a lot of scoring, and soccer is a little bit more, you've got to fill that time and discuss what teams are doing. How can we anticipate a goal because scoring is so minimal? So that every sport kind of presents a unique challenge, and it's different for every play-by-play broadcaster. I don't consider baseball one of my stronger sports, but I know several people where that's their preferred sport to call. And for me, I'm much more comfortable with football because I played it in high school. I'm much more comfortable with hockey because I've done it for so long and I love the sport. And so every broadcaster is just different in the uniqueness of how sports play out in front of them and their ability to tell that story.
Now, I'm with you on the, anything can happen in hockey because your Knoxville Ice Bears and my Roanoke Rail Yard Dogs hold one of my favorite hockey moments of all time in the goalie fight that happened several years ago. And so, yeah, I'm with you. But how fun is that to call when you get something unique like a goalie fight?
Yeah, and that particular game, I think that was a November-December game back in 2022. So it was, there wasn't a ton on the line in that moment. Obviously, the rivalry was pretty heated because Roanoke had eliminated Knoxville from the postseason the year before. And I don't think I had seen a full-on goalie versus goalie fight at that point in my career. As long as I had been around, I hadn't really witnessed that yet. I had seen goalies get into fights with other skaters. I had not seen two goalies meet at center ice. And what's crazy is that might not even be a top 3 moment between Knoxville and Roanoke in the last 3 years. So Yours big standout moment, really goes to show like what you've kind of missed at the same time because that same season was the bench brawl.
Yep, I was
just a couple of months later. And so that's the one that's so chaotic for me because you've got guys getting ejected. Then you have their suspensions being lifted because the officiating crew ejected the wrong guys that weren't actually involved in the brawl. Knoxville has to show up the following night with 11 skaters in front of 7,000 people at the Berglund Center. So, that's the thing is people have all these memories about, what happened at a hockey game that they went to. And when you're seeing every single game over the course of a decade, well, it may not even be a top 5 moment in the history of that rivalry alone, let alone the entire team's history. So yeah, anything can truly go off and on in a hockey game.
No, absolutely. Because I was really sad that we don't travel to away games because as soon as I saw that happened, I was like, man, I wish I was in Knoxville right now. Yeah, that was absolutely crazy. The iconic video of Bremner walking off the ice, pointing at his ring, will forever be ingrained in my memory. Just because, regardless of where you stand on either side of that rivalry, that moment is hilarious.
Yeah, and with that's the Cole McKechnie, Dominic Marcinkiewicz clash. Marcinkiewicz, a guy that's really tough, not afraid of contact. He gets under your skin, and he had kind of baited one Knoxville player into, basically taking a game misconduct already. And so then Cole McKechnie goes after him, and Owen McDade goes after McKechnie as he's trying to get back to the bench. You've got players from Roanoke pushing on the stanchion, separating the benches. And then after, security has to get involved, Bremner's standing up on the wall of his bench and then has to be escorted. Doesn't even get to be walked off the ice, which is normally the custom at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum. He has to go around back behind the bench and showing his ring finger, as that's what Roanoke fans would say, to the crowd, reminding everybody that he's married, is Dan Bremner, as he makes his way back to the locker room. But I mean, tempers and emotions run high. And I think that's one of the challenges with a sport like hockey is, as a broadcaster, you're on the bus with these guys, you build, you try to be a professional, but you do build relationships with them because you're in hotels with them. It's not like you're taking a separate flight because you're part of the production crew. It's minor league hockey. Everybody's riding together. You're on the bus for 6, 7, 10 hours at a time. You're staying in hotels together. Sometimes you're rooming with a player. You have meals with these guys. They get to know you. You get to know them. And so you go out and you see situations like this, and you have to kind of keep your emotions in check. And honestly, I'm not the best at that. There have been times where I've done it where, people wonder, why didn't you get into the mess a little bit more? And it's not really my place to do that. And the players do plenty of that on their own. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges is you have to kind of keep yourself, on notice and remember what your role is to inform and entertain. And, there are times to share your opinion. There are times to take sides. Obviously, when you're hired by a team, part of your job is to support and homer up that team. But there are certain lines that you have to kind of be careful what you toe and what you say. And so I try to pick my spots very carefully. Sometimes I do that during better games than others, but that is one of the challenges for hockey is that, calls get missed and tempers run high and guys take cheap shots and fights occur and your friends get hurt. That's just kind of the way it is sometimes. So it's a nature of the business and it's a nature of the sport.
Now, I will say that is something that I have personally struggled with, having to cover Virginia Tech, having been such a Virginia Tech fan for so long. So I definitely feel you on that. But I guess let's transition into this. What is your all-time favorite broadcasting moment?
It's really tough to say. My second high school football game, I got to call a game-winning field goal, and that was pretty cool. That was it was the second game of the season for Hardin Valley. The first year that I started calling them back in 2018, it was only my third high school football broadcast ever. It was kind of cool for me because I was a kicker in high school, so to get to witness a game-winning field goal, it was a redemption kick too. So the kicker had missed one earlier in the fourth quarter, and from the left hash mark, about 36 yards out. Gave up a game-tying score. That would have sealed it. They gave up a game-tying score and then ran back the kick return into field goal range, enough time for him to be able to kick another 36-yard field goal from the left hash. So virtually the same kick, and got to nail it. So got to have a game-winning field goal call just the second game of the season. That was special. And for Hardin Valley, it was their first time ever beating West High School, which was kind of a rival for them. And still to this day, the only time that they've beaten West. And so it was, it was special, definitely a special moment. Really cool to be a part of that, since we were new to the Hardin Valley community. They didn't really know us. So to kind of be a part of that moment, I think really helped grow our brand within the fan base. So for football, that's probably the biggest one. For hockey, there's been so many moments. There was the Dennis Sicard double overtime game-winning goal my first year calling the game. That clinched the semifinal series. Knoxville went on to win the title the following week. The championship call was obviously really cool. There's so many moments from that first season that were really neat. There was a triple overtime game-winning goal that I got to be a part of a couple years later. And, Knoxville having a 42-win season when they finally clinched the regular season record and clinched the regular season trophy, getting to win first place was neat. But I think what really stood out to me, what really made me thankful for this, was actually game 3 of the semifinal series this past season down in Birmingham. Knoxville had to rally from a game down against Roanoke and had to win twice on the road. And then, you're coming off this high and then you go and lose 4 days later at home to Birmingham after you make, a couple of really tough mistakes in your own end, and kind of wondered, man, do we have the speed to keep up with such a talented Birmingham squad? Now we've got to go to Birmingham, play in front of a packed house on Friday, they're trying to get back to the finals after losing as the 1 seed in the first round the year before. Their squad was absolutely loaded. So many returners, but also new pieces that were so electrifying. They got Andrew Ballant late in the season. He was such a dynamic playmaker. He was huge for them throughout the postseason. And, we go and we come out hot in the first period and we run away with game 2. And then game 3 was at 2:00 the following afternoon. So it's not just back-to-back nights. You're talking about 2 games in less than 20 hours. And we go in and build a 2-0 lead in the first period. We give it right back, give up a game-tying goal with less than a minute to go in the second. You're kind of wondering, man, are we out of gas? And we're not really getting chances. We get a power play midway through the third. The game's going back and forth, and we don't really take advantage of the power play. But as the penalty expires, Anthony Sonato just goes up and rips a dart from the right circle, and suddenly there's life on our bench again. Like, we're up 3-2. Like, okay, now here comes Birmingham. And then Dawson McKinney just hits the shot of his life from his trademark spot atop the right circle. And, there's about 2.5 minutes left to go in the game. And that's when I knew, like, we're going to the finals. Like, this is our series. And my GM was next to me in the booth. And, he normally doesn't react. Like, his superstition is he stands in a spot during a game. And if we get scored on, he leaves. But he didn't do that for this game because we had won the night before. We built a 2-0 lead. So he stayed during the third period. And the only time I heard him the entire weekend was when that 4th goal went in. Was that when I could hear him through my headset. That's how excited he was. And it was so neat to just kind of revel in that moment, thinking like, we're the 6th seed. Last year, we didn't even make the playoffs. And now we're going to the finals. And I got multiple text messages from, different people, broadcasters and people around the league, just talking about what a great game it was. Not even so much my call, but just what an awesome hockey game. It was such high quality hockey. And so I think for me that just with this group of guys, this was such a fun group this past season. So for the Ice Bears, it's honestly probably that game, even though we lost in the finals the following week, to be a part of a moment like that, because so many playoff moments in the NHL are games that you remember that don't necessarily result in cup championships. There's this awesome, oh, what a first round series. And that team lost in the second round, but it doesn't matter because years later, we're still talking about that save or that goal. I'm never going to forget game 3 of the 2025 semifinals. Like, that game's going to stick with me forever.
Now, speaking of last year, you ended up winning SPHL Broadcaster of the Year. First and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you.
Because that's a great honor. What does that mean to you to have that recognition?
It means a lot because it's an award voted on by the broadcasters in the league. So, obviously the broadcasting fraternity, we all get along because we have to help each other. None of the hotels in the SPHL have working printers. So we're all having to print each other's stuff when we're coming in from out of town. I don't know what the deal is with that, but like, if you stay at a hotel, the printer probably doesn't work. And so, I get emails from guys all the time, like, hey, do you mind printing this off for me? The hotel printer doesn't work, but I have to do the same thing when I'm on the road for them. Like, hey, can you guys help me out? So we have a good fraternity, and, several guys in the SPHL over the years have gone on to the ECHL. There's a former broadcaster who got to spend 4 years in the AHL, a couple of guys that have gone to the OHL. And it's cool to see guys move up, but it goes to show how much the broadcasting quality has improved in the time that I've been here. Cause that wasn't the case when I first got into the league. A lot of it was part-time broadcasters, not a lot of guys traveling. And, a lot of the broadcasters weren't primary broadcasters. They were, working other gigs, or they were just doing it for fun. And so you could tell, like, it wasn't a craft that guys were really trying to work on. And so more teams have invested more into their broadcast departments. And so it makes the quality really deep. And so, for me, that award didn't exist until 2 years ago. Mitch Stewart from Roanoke won it last year as the first ever recipient. And so for me, I kind of remember thinking to myself, like, man, it's like, I'm happy that it exists now, but it's like, man, it's kind of a bummer that it didn't exist before, because I'd like to think in the first 9 years of calling games, like, maybe I would have won it once. But it means more to win it now for the first time with such a deep group of broadcasters, and to win it in a fashion where, yeah, you all respect each other, but at the same time, you are kind of competing against each other for that award, because guys are trying to move up. They're trying to build their resumes, and not every broadcast situation in minor league hockey is made the same way. Some guys might need to, feel like they need to move up out of necessity. Other guys are content with where they're at. Other guys, it's a stop along the road until they look for their next thing, maybe in another sport. So I think when you keep all that stuff in mind and guys have different things that they're trying to accomplish in their careers, it means a lot to have that recognition, getting all the text messages from everyone, not just the fellow broadcasters, but hearing from current players, former players, players from other teams when we were, when we were still in the playoffs, guys from Birmingham saying congrats, fans from Birmingham saying congrats, getting congratulatory messages from fans from other teams, a congratulatory email from Mike Emmerich, a social media message from Pete Weber, the voice of the Nashville Predators. And the one that I think hit me emotionally the most was hearing from former Ice Bears head coach Jeff Carr, who is in the middle of a playoff run of his own with the Norfolk Admirals. They came so close to advancing to the conference finals, and for him to take time out of his busy schedule, he's so hungry to win at any level he coaches at. I was at dinner with my family actually celebrating the award the day that it happened, and then I looked down at my phone and I see a text message from Jeff Carr saying it's long overdue. Congratulations. And he was actually in town about a month later, so got to finally see him again. Hadn't seen him since he took the job in Norfolk. So it, that stuff means a lot, not just from fellow broadcasters, but from so many people around the sport. And it reminds you how small the hockey world really is, but it really meant a lot. I was really excited to hear the news.
Yeah, which also shout out to my hometown team, the Norfolk Admirals. Always ready to shout out the 757. So I'll give you one last question before we head into the lightning round and finish things up. What do you think this Knoxville Ice Bears team is capable of this season?
Well, several returners have already been announced, and there's been a couple of new signings as well. So they brought in Jarrett Cupp, a veteran defenseman who spent his entire SPHL career with Macon and Fayetteville, so he knows the lay of the land, and I think that provides depth on the back end. Cam Tobey's been announced to re-sign. Tyler Williams, really electrifying rookie playmaker, has been re-signed. The captain, Jimmy Soper's been re-signed, and that's the first time in a while that we've had a returning captain. And so when we've had this rotation of coaches since the departure of Jeff Carr, we had Brent Clark for basically a season. He gets let go at the beginning of year 2. Andrew Harrison takes it over on an interim basis, and then John Gurskus has to come in. So you're essentially talking about 4 coaches in 4 years. And in this league, that's not going to get it done. You look at the jobs that Dan Bremner and John Guy Trudell and Glenn DeTulio, before he moved into a front office role, the jobs that those guys did with their respective organizations because they were with their teams for so long. Leadership stability is so important at any league. So I think the culture being developed is a big step, but John Gurskus he's gonna take things slow. He likes the developmental side of it. He wants to work with young players. He was a junior coach for over a decade, and he likes that side of it. That's his favorite part of the job. He talks about that is, I like the development side of it. Yeah, I want guys that are talented and can make plays and do the things that we need them to do, but I'm willing to work with a younger guy who might not have the pro experience if I know he's hungry and I know what he can be by the time we get to April. And I think you saw that with a lot of rookies last year. I think 11 of our 20 playoff roster guys were rookies going into the postseason. And for us to make the finals, I thought it was a big step. We grabbed some college guys right at the end of the season that I know that we put on our protected list. I think the hope is that those guys will be back. So there's a lot of excitement as far as what it can be. It ultimately comes down to what happens in April. So it's going to depend on call-ups. I never like making assessments. I think there's a lot of optimism because there is a core that's coming back, and that's something we haven't had in 4-5 years. But I think when you look at the culture, how it's changing, the fact that Knoxville had a successful playoff run, it makes it more appealing for players to play. It really ultimately just depends on guys staying healthy and which guys decide, I want to take a shot at the ECHL, or I'm going to take this opportunity to travel and see the world. I'm going to go play overseas. I know a couple of our players have already, their European teams have already announced their signings. So we are losing some guys from last year, but that's just the nature of the sport. So I think it can be a really good team. I'm more optimistic than I was a couple of years ago. And it's a good place to be coming off, our first postseason win in 6 years. So it's nice to be able to have playoff success to talk about again.
Right. Absolutely. All right. We're going to head into the lightning round. I'm going to throw a question at you. I just want you to give me the gut reaction answer. All right.
All right.
Your dream sporting event that you'd love to call someday.
Tennis. Haven't called it, played it in college. That's the one sport I'd love to call.
All right. What is your go-to meal before a broadcast?
Whatever the team decides to feed me. I'm not picking when it comes to food.
In your opinion, if you are not broadcasting a game, where's the best place to sit?
My house. I don't go to a lot of games as a spectator. No, but I actually went to game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals back in 2017, and I actually got a center ice seat way up high in the nosebleed. So basically the view that I already have from most sporting events that I attend. I'm cozy up there. I'm not afraid of heights.
I was going to say, at least you're comfortable, right?
Yeah.
A broadcaster or mentor that you looked up to?
Doc Emmerich, we were talking about him before the show. He's been really helpful. He's been a mentor for me throughout my career. He's listened to demo tapes, been really helpful. Mike Keith, the longtime voice of the Tennessee Titans, has helped me a lot with high school football. He just was announced as the new voice of the Vols to replace Bob Kessling. So 2 guys I'm very thankful for. My advisor and radio professor, Dr. Dale Van Camfert, has had a lot of successful pupils in broadcasting, especially guys that have been a lot more successful than me, but I'm proud to be at least a success story. And then actually, this is going to be a funny one, but Tim Kittro, the voice of all the midway sports games, because I played those so much growing up that when I watch sports without sound, or I'm just like seeing sports unfold, I hear his voice in my head a lot. So, and there have been times where I have quoted things that he has said in NFL Blitz, NHL Hits, NBA Jam. There have been times where I have said things that he has said during a broadcast, not the obvious ones. I don't say boom shakalaka or anything like that, but there have been times where I have snuck in Kitroisms. And I really hope I get the opportunity to tell him that one day, because he truly has influenced my career. Like, he sounds like a legitimate broadcaster, not just a voice actor that does sports games.
I love that. And then last but not least, what is your favorite way to unwind after a long road trip?
My wife and I really enjoy spending time with our 2 daughters. They're 3 and 1. So we're kind of in, we're in a really fun time right now where our girls are exploring everything. My oldest actually is becoming a hockey fan, which is awesome. So especially during hockey season, like part of it is just because she wants to delay going to bed, but they're like, all right, kiddo, it's time for you to go to bed. She'll be like, Dad, I watch hockey? Watch hockey? Like, all right, 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and then you're going to bed for real. And then 15 minutes later, we're still up.
Yeah,
but,
that's how they get you. Yeah.
Lot of
dad myself, like I get it. That's how they get you.
I'm wrapped. I'm completely wrapped. But no, yeah, a lot of family time, a lot of trips to the zoo, parks, playgrounds. I'm trying to teach my daughter how to skate. She's already got a hockey stick, so like we're working on it. I'm trying here. Like, just I'm trying to raise them the right way.
Hey, we love that. We need more hockey players in this world for sure. All right, Joel, it has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. Appreciate you having me.
Awesome.